Real stories of werewolves of Dogman history from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
The Wolfman Saved My Kitten. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I still see those eyes in my dreams. Luminous yellow beacons cutting through the twilight mist, set in a face that defied everything I thought I knew about the natural world. Massive and wolf-like, yet eerily human in its movements, the creature's silhouette dominated the pine branch against the darkening sky. Its fur, dense and shadowed in blue-black hues, rippled as it extended a massive clawed hand towards something so small and so vulnerable. That image has haunted me for a decade now, burned into my memory like a photograph that refuses to fade. Sometimes I wake in the night, heart pounding, certain I've heard the creak of branches outside my window. Other times I catch myself staring at Nugget, my now elderly orange tabby, dozing on the windowsill, wondering if he remembers it too. It kinda sounds impossible when I say it aloud, which is why I rarely do. Who would believe that on a crisp autumn evening 10 years ago, a creature straight from folklore emerged from the woods behind my rural Michigan home? But the evidence purrs beside me every evening, kneading my lap with contented paws, blissfully unaware that his life, and mine, pivoted on an encounter that defies explanation. I never intended to have a cat. A tiny orange fluff ball simply appeared one August morning, mewling pathetically beneath my porch steps. No more than 5 weeks old, he was all oversized ears and wobbling legs, his ribs visible beneath matted fur. I left out a saucer of milk, expecting him to drink it and disappear, a fleeting visitor in my solitary life. Just until someone claims you, I told him sternly as he curled up on my chest that first night, purring with surprising force for something so small. Well, no one ever claimed him. Nugget, named for his rust-colored coat, quickly claimed me instead. He was fearless from the start, scaling curtains and launching himself from furniture with reckless abandon. My cabin, once a quiet sanctuary after my divorce, filled with jingling cat toys and the patter of tiny paws racing across hardwood floors at 3 a.m. "You've got mountain lion in your blood," I'd tell him, watching him stalk fallen leaves through the window. The locals in these parts have their stories about these woods, of course. Every small town does. Old-timers at the diner speak in hushed tones about strange howls that don't quite sound like wolves, about cattle mutilations back in the 80s, about something massive glimpsed crossing the highway during a blizzard in 1992. I dismiss them as rural legends, the kind that thrive in places where entertainment is largely self-created. It's just wildlife, I'd say, with the confidence of someone who'd moved from Seattle only 3 years prior. People see what they expect to see in the dark. I didn't yet understand in those days that sometimes the dark reveals exactly what we've trained ourselves not to believe in. That October evening started like any other. The maple trees were shedding their fiery coats across my yard when I realized I hadn't seen Nugget since lunch. A quick search of his usual hiding spots turned up empty until I heard it. That distinct, frightened mewling that makes a pet owner's heart drop like a stone. I found the kitten 30 feet up in my tallest pine, clinging to a branch, his tiny orange body barely visible against the darkening sky. His adventure had outpaced his courage. "Come on, buddy," I called, trying to keep panic from my own voice as I dragged the ladder from the shed. It was too short, by half. I tried everything, tempting him with tuna, climbing up as high as safety allowed, even calling the fire department, though politely informing that they don't rescue cats in trees. They always come down eventually, the dispatcher assured me. But darkness was falling fast, bringing with it the autumn chill that settles into mountain valleys like water. Clouds gathered overhead, the promise of rain. Nugget's cries grew more desperate as the wind picked up, shaking his already precarious perch. The branch he clung to swayed dangerously, and in that moment, I had never felt more helpless. I was contemplating a desperate climb with some rope when the movement caught my eye, something shifting in the upper branches, separate from the wind's rhythm. At first I thought it was just shadows gathering as daylight faded, but then I glimpsed something solid moving with deliberate purpose. My blood turned to ice water as a massive form emerged from the higher foliage, carefully navigating toward the branch where Nugget was trapped. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. This creature was enormous, easily 7 feet tall even on all fours, its body covered in dense fur that appeared almost blue-black in the fading light. But it was that face that stopped my breath, wolf-like in structure, but with an intelligence behind its features that no wolf possesses. Its snout was shorter than a true wolf's, its brow heavy, over eyes that glowed with an unnatural amber luminescence. Those eyes seemed to generate their own light, twin beacons scanning the situation with unmistakable calculation. Its ears, pointed and alert, twitched at Nugget's continued cries. I wanted to run. I wanted to shout. I wanted to do something. But my body refused every command my brain issued. I could only watch as this impossible being inched closer to my kitten, its massive weight causing the branch to bow precariously. The unmistakable sound of wood beginning to splinter cut through the evening air. The branch was giving way beneath them. There was nothing I could do but witness whatever happened next. The large creature paused at the sound, those eerie eyes flicking toward the trunk, clearly assessing the stability of its perch. Its movements were deliberate, careful, nothing like the mindless predator my instincts screamed this must be. One massive hand-like paw reached out, extending toward my trembling kitten. The wood groaned again, louder this time. They were running out of time. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into an hour, as the creature extended its massive paw toward Nugget. My heart hammered against my ribs, a primal percussion of fear. Every instinct screamed to intervene, yet my feet remained rooted to the earth below. The dogman's movements were surprisingly delicate, almost tender. Those fearsome claws, each as long as my index finger, retracted slightly as it reached for my kitten. Nugget, shockingly, had stopped crying. His tiny frame trembled, but his eyes were locked with the creature's glowing gaze and what looked eerily like communication. The branch gave another warning groan, deeper this time. Small fragments of bark showered down like autumn confetti. Then, it happened. A movement so swift yet gentle, it defied the creature's massive form. The dogman's paw cupped around Nugget's tiny body, scooping him up with the cautious precision of someone handling precious crystal. My kitten disappeared into that enormous furred grasp, and my heart stopped completely. The branch finally surrendered with a sickening crack, but the dogman had already shifted its weight, powerful muscles bunching beneath that midnight fur, as it secured both itself and its tiny cargo with its free arm anchored to the trunk. For one breathtaking moment they hung there, predator and prey, savior and saved, suspended between heaven and earth in an impossible harmony. The dogman descended quickly, navigating the pine's branches like it knew them intimately. I remained frozen, watching this impossible rescue unfold. When its massive feet touched the ground 30 yards from me, we locked eyes. That gaze, ancient and knowing, pierced through me, seeing something I couldn't name. I approached with deliberate steps, each one making the earth beneath my feet tremble slightly. Then, with unexpected gentleness, it placed Nugget on the grass before me. My kitten was completely unharmed, although damp with the creature's warm breath. Before I could process what was happening, the dogman had turned, dropping to all fours and loping back toward the tree line with surprising speed. It disappeared into the shadows, which seemed to welcome it back home. I don't remember going back inside. My next clear memory is sitting at my kitchen table, trembling, with Nugget curled in my lap as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows, nature's quiet applause for a drama I couldn't begin to process. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept replaying those moments, especially those glowing eyes that held something far beyond animal intelligence. What had I witnessed? The local legends suddenly felt less like campfire stories and more like warnings written in code. In the weeks that followed, I scoured the internet and library, digging through folklore from dozens of cultures. Native American tales of skinwalkers, medicine men who could transform into animals, European legends of werewolves and their complex morality, stories from Mexico about brujos that shifted forms to roam the night. Each offered pieces of a puzzle that I couldn't complete. The creature had shown mercy. It had shown intention, compassion, qualities beyond mere animal instinct. No predator rescues another species young without purpose. Whatever had saved Nugget that night had made a choice, a conscious decision that spoke of something more than beast, something that understood the bond between a man and his kitten.
I realized we were running on time when I saw we got joined by Sacred Enzyme. Please join me in thanking and welcoming our newest channel member, Sacred Enzyme, for making this episode possible. As a channel member who signed up at YouTube, Sacred Enzyme gets to see the brand new secret uncensored episodes we're dropping this week, including The Drunken Dogman and Dogman vs. Sheep Squatch.
Werewolf Pet My Cat. Dear Scary Stories NYC, this is the story of the craziest thing that ever happened to me. The night I saw a real-life dogman reach out to grab my beloved pet cat, Rusty. I've always been what you'd call a practical person. My friends teased me for being the skeptic of our group. Ghost stories? Just your imagination running wild. Bigfoot? Probably someone in a costume looking for attention. UFOs? They're probably weather balloons or experimental aircraft. I was the guy who needed hard evidence for everything, who found logical explanations where others saw the supernatural. At least, that's who I was until that night last October. What I witnessed from my bedroom window changed everything I thought I knew about the world around us. It forced me to reconsider what might be lurking in the shadows, what might be watching us when we think we're alone. Because sometimes reality is stranger than any story you could make up. When I tell you I saw a dogman, a 7-foot-tall creature with the body of a human and the head of a wolf, sitting at my picnic table out back, reaching for my cat, you'll probably react the same way I would have, with disbelief. But I know what I saw, and what happened next was even more unbelievable. My house sits on 3 acres at the edge of the woods. It's nothing fancy, a 2-story colonial with faded blue paint that I've been meaning to touch up for some years now. But it's mine. And I love the privacy. My closest neighbor is a half-mile down a winding dirt road, and the forest creates a natural boundary at the rear of my property. I bought the place 5 years ago, drawn by the quiet and the way the stars shine without light pollution. The picnic table in the backyard was already there when I moved in, old and weathered but sturdy. I've spent countless evenings sitting there, watching the sunset with Rusty curled up beside me. Speaking of Rusty, he was a cat who came into my life about 3 years ago. I found him as a half-starved kitten, huddled under my porch during a thunderstorm. He was nothing but bones and matted orange fur, with a notched ear and wary eyes. The plan was to take him to the shelter the next day, but, well, you know how that goes. By the morning he was purring on my chest, and I was on my way to the pet store for supplies. Rusty grew into a big, handsome tomcat with striking amber eyes, and a personality bigger than his body. He splits his time between indoor naps and outdoor adventures, but he always comes running when I call. Every night before bed I check to make sure he's either inside or at least visible in the yard. This was our routine. The night everything happened, it started normally enough. I'd worked late on a project deadline for my job and had a quick dinner, then got to bed around 11. But sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and I turned, my mind racing with work problems and mundane worries of adult life. The full moon was exceptionally bright that night, casting silver light through my curtains. The woods were unusually quiet, too. No distant owls, no rustling leaves. Despite the light breeze, I could see moving the treetops. In retrospect, that silence should have been my first clue that something was weird. At around 1:30 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to get some water. As I passed my bedroom window, something in the yard caught my eye. A dark shape at my picnic table that hadn't been there earlier. I stopped, thinking at first it might be a deer. We do get them sometimes coming out of the forest to nibble at my sad attempts at gardening. But this shape was wrong. It was sitting at the table, the way a person would, on the bench. I moved closer to the window, squinting through the moonlight. That's when I realized what I was looking at wasn't human, and it wasn't deer. Not even close. The creature sat hunched forward, its massive shoulders curved inward. Even seated, I could tell it was tall, much taller than me, and I'm 6 foot even. Its body seemed human-shaped but bulkier, covered in dark fur that appeared almost black in the moonlight. Its arms were too long, ending in hands that looked almost human, but with visible claws catching the light when they moved. But it was the head that I found most disturbing. Perched on those shoulders was unmistakably the head of a wolf. Elongated snout, pointed ears standing straight up, alert, and scanning the darkness. When it turned slightly, I could see its eyes reflecting the moonlight with an eerie yellow glow. My mind scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. A man in a costume? But the proportions were all wrong. The movements, too. A bear with mange? No bear sits at a picnic table like a person at dinner. A hallucination from exhaustion. I rubbed my eyes, but the creature remained below. What I was looking at, impossible as it seemed, was a dogman. The creature from campfire stories and internet forums that I'd always dismissed as fantasy. I stood frozen at my window, afraid to move. Then something orange caught my eye, and my heart nearly stopped. Rusty, my brave, foolish cat, was trotting across the lawn toward the picnic table. Toward the monster. No, 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 I whispered, pressing my hands against the glass. The dogman's ears twitched. It turned its massive head, spotting my approaching cat. I saw its posture change slightly, becoming more alert. Then, slowly, deliberately, it reached one long clawed hand toward Rusty. I didn't think. I reacted. My cat, my friend, was in danger. I spun away from the window and I bolted for the stairs, adrenaline flooding my system. Whatever awaited me in my backyard, I couldn't let it hurt Rusty. My feet barely touched the stairs as I flew down them, taking 3 at a time. In the darkness, I nearly tumbled head first, catching myself on the banister at the last second. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The image of those long, clawed fingers reaching toward my trusting cat burned in my mind, propelling me forward. Rusty, I called out, but only in a harsh whisper. Some primal instinct warned me against making too much noise. I stumbled through the dark living room, banging my shin against the coffee table. Pain shot up my leg, but I barely registered it. Where was something I could use as a weapon? My eyes darted around the shadowy house. There, the fireplace poker. I snatched it up, the cold iron heavy in my trembling hand. What was I thinking? I was about to confront something straight out of a nightmare with nothing but a poker and sheer desperation. But Rusty, trusting, innocent Rusty, he didn't know what danger he was walking into. 3 years of memories flashed through my mind. The tiny kitten I'd rescued, the way he curled up on my chest during thunderstorms, his habit of bringing me gifts of leaves and twigs instead of dead animals. I couldn't stay inside. I wouldn't. The house was eerily silent as I moved through it, my bare feet padding across the cool hard wood. Through the kitchen now, nearly slipping on the tile, I could see the back door. that flimsy barrier between me and whatever it was sitting there outside. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. What if the creature had already... No, I couldn't think like that. Instead of rushing out blindly, I sidled up to the window beside the door. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could see part of the yard and the edge of the picnic table. I needed to assess the situation. I needed to know what I was about to face. My breath fogged the glass as I peered out. The moonlight cast everything in silvery blue, making the scene before me seem even more surreal. I could see the massive silhouette of the creature, its back still to me, hulking over the picnic table. And there was movement. Something small and orange. Rusty was still alive. I adjusted my position, trying to get a better view, without making myself visible. The fireplace poker was slick in my sweaty grip as I pressed my face closer to the glass, squinting to make sense of what I was seeing. And that's when everything I thought I knew turned upside down. That dogman wasn't attacking my cat. It was petting him. Those massive hands that looked capable of ripping a door from its hinges were gently, almost delicately, stroking Rusty's fur. The creature's long fingers moved with surprising grace, scratching behind my cat's ears exactly where he liked it best. And Rusty, my supposedly loyal companion, was arching his back in obvious pleasure, his tail straight up in a gesture of complete feline contentment. I stood frozen, the poker hanging limply at my side, trying to process what I was witnessing. The dogman's movements were careful, intentional, as if it knew exactly how fragile the cat was compared to its own strength. There was something almost tender at the way it hunched over to better reach the small animal. Even from where I stood, I could hear Rusty's thunderous purring cutting through the night air. It was the same purr he reserved for me when I gave him his favorite chin scratches, or when he found the perfect sunbeam. But now, it was directed at this monster, this impossible being that defied everything I believed about the natural world. And the strangest feeling crept over me, a ridiculous, inappropriate pang of jealousy. Here was my cat, the companion who I'd rescued and fed and cared for, practically melting under the attention of this stranger, this creature, this monster that shouldn't even exist. The dogman tilted its massive head, watching Rusty with what I could only describe as curiosity. In the moonlight, I could see more details now, the varied colors in its fur, not just black, but mottled with grays and browns, the way its pointed ears swiveled slightly at every small sound, the surprising gentleness in those unnaturally yellow eyes. The dogman reached down again, and this time Rusty rolled onto his back, exposing his belly, the ultimate sign of feline trust. My mouth fell open. Rusty rarely showed his belly to me, and never to strangers, yet here he was, completely vulnerable before a predator that could end him with a single swipe. The dogman's clawed hand hovered over the cat's exposed stomach, and for a moment I tensed, ready to burst through the door. But then those fingers began to gently scratch the orange fur, and Rusty stretched in bliss, paws kneading the air. I watched transfixed as this improbable scene unfolded in my backyard. The terrifying creature from folklore was behaving like me on a lazy Sunday afternoon with my pet. There was intelligence in those movements, consideration, maybe even affection. Minutes passed this way, with me pressed against the window, and the unlikely pair outside sharing what appeared to be a moment of genuine connection. Rusty rolled back onto his feet and rubbed himself against the dogman, marking it with his scent the way he did with furniture, claiming it. The creature made a sound then, a soft rumble that wasn't quite human, but wasn't entirely animal either. It reminded me of a contented sound that Rusty made when he was particularly pleased. Was it something like maybe the dogman purring back? The moonlight caught the creature's profile as it looked down at my cat, and I could have sworn I saw its mouth, that fearsome fanged muzzle, curve into something resembling a smile. In that moment, illuminated by silver light, with my cat happily circling it, the dogman didn't look like a monster from nightmares. It looked like a being experiencing a simple moment of joy. And that, somehow, was even more astonishing to me than its existence in the first place. I don't know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was the jealousy, or maybe just the need to protect what was mine, but I found myself slowly turning the doorknob. The click of the latch sounded impossibly loud in the quiet night. The dogman's ears immediately swiveled toward the sound. Its entire body tensed, though its hand remained gentle on Rusty's fur. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking slightly. The cool night air rushed over me, raising goosebumps on my arms. "Rusty," I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. The poker was still gripped tightly in my hand, though it felt incredibly inadequate now that I could see the creature up close, full size. My cat looked up, blinking lazily at me, but made no move to come my way. The traitor. The dogman and I locked eyes across the moonlit yard. Time seemed to stretch between us, pulling like taffy into something endless and strange. Those eyes, they weren't animal eyes. At least, not completely. There was something in them, an awareness, an intelligence that sent shivers through me. I expected it to turn, to bolt into the woods like any wild creature confronted by a human. Or worse, to charge at me, to protect its newfound feline friend from my intrusion. However, it did neither. Instead, it slowly straightened up to its full height. Standing, it was even more imposing, easily 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a powerful frame that seemed both human and wolf simultaneously. My mouth went dry. The poker in my hand might as well have been a toothpick. But there was no aggression in its posture, no bared teeth or raised hackles. It simply stood, regarding me with those impossible eyes that reflected the moonlight like twin lamps. A question formed in my mind unbidden. "What are you?" Although no words passed between us, I felt something, a presence at the edges of my consciousness, like standing at the shore of a vast alien ocean. Not words, but impressions, curiosity, caution, intelligence. An awareness so different from my own that it defied description. Rusty, oblivious to the tension, rubbed against the dogman's arm once more before trotting halfway across the yard, stopping at the no man's land between us. He looked back at the creature, then at me, as if wondering why his two friends weren't getting along. The absurdity of this situation was not lost on me. Standing in my backyard at 2 a.m, having a silent standoff with a mythical creature, while my cat played the role of mediator. I lowered the poker slightly, a gesture that felt both foolish and necessary. The dogman's ears twitched, then slowly, deliberately, it inclined its massive head toward me. Not quite a nod, but an acknowledgement of some sort. We had reached an understanding, this impossible being and I, with only the moon and a purring cat as our witnesses. The moment stretched between us, crackling with unspoken communication. Then Rusty meowed loudly, breaking the spell. The sound seemed to trigger something in the dogman. I cast one last look at my cat, something almost like fondness in its gaze, and then it turned toward the forest. Its movement was impossibly fast for something so large. One moment it was standing by my picnic table, and the next it was at the tree line, a shadow among other shadows. It paused there, looking back over its shoulder. The moonlight caught its eyes one last time, 2 glowing points in the darkness, and then it was gone, melting into the forest without a sound. I stood frozen for several long moments, straining my eyes to catch any movement among the trees, but I saw nothing. If not for Rusty still sitting in the middle of the yard, I might have convinced myself I had hallucinated the entire encounter. "Rusty," I called again, my voice stronger now. "Come here, buddy." This time he responded, trotting over to weave between my legs. I scooped him up, holding him close, feeling his warm weight against my chest. His fur smelled of pine and something else, something wild and unfamiliar. I carried him inside, locking the door behind us, with shaking hands. Sleep was out of the question. I spent the rest of the night in my living room armchair facing the back windows. Rusty, unaware that anything was wrong, curled contentedly in my lap and slept. Every shadow made my heart race. Every distant sound from the forest had me tensing. But I didn't see anything approaching the house. As dawn broke, washing my yard in pale light, doubts began to creep in. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Could exhaustion and an overactive imagination have transformed some ordinary woodland creature into a figure from folklore? The rational part of my mind worked overtime, trying to explain away the impossible. But then I'd look down at Rusty, peacefully sleeping in my lap, and I'd remember the gentle way those clawed hands had stroked his fur. No hallucination could have explained that. No ordinary animal could have connected with my cat, the way I saw the Dogman doing. Whatever it was I'd witnessed, it had been real, and nothing would ever be quite the same for me again. I don't know if the Dogman will ever return to my yard, if I'll ever again witness that impossible moment of connection between the species that should never have met. Part of me hopes I will. Part of me is terrified by the prospect. But one thing I know for certain. Whenever my Rusty purrs a little louder and stares into the darkness with expectant eyes, I feel not fear, but a strange sense of privilege. For one brief night, my ordinary backyard became the meeting place of two worlds, and though I may never understand exactly what happened or why, I'm grateful to have been there to witness it. After all, how many people can say they've been jealous of the Dogman?
Team Dogman for men of the world, and it also looks cute on girls. The hat says Dogman, I'm happy to meet you, but there's no guarantee that Dogman won't eat you. Team Dogman hat, it's the prescription. The link to get your own is in the description.
He's from Ireland, and he's no balker. He's a hero to our channel, Godzilla Tim Walker. Please join me in thanking one of our longest and most cherished channel members, Godzilla Tim Walker, for making this episode possible. As a channel member, Tim gets to see the brand new secret, uncensored episodes we're dropping this weekend, including Dogman vs. Sheepsquatch.
Dogman was my housemate. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I used to have a Dogman living inside my home with me. It's not something I would recommend, and by the time you finish hearing my story, I think you'll agree with my assessment. I remember being jolted awake from an afternoon nap by a crashing sound from my kitchen, but the thunderous sound of my grandmother's china cabinet toppling wasn't the kind of alarm clock I'd signed up for. The scene that greeted me when I reached the kitchen doorway is one I'll never forget, no matter how many years pass. There he stood, all 6 foot something of him, on 2 legs, massive catcher's mitt paws fumbling with my cookie jar. His hulking fur-covered frame looked absurdly out of place against my floral wallpaper and gingham curtains. The cabinet lay on its side, decades of collected teacups scattered across my linoleum floor like casualties of war. What struck me most wasn't the destruction, though. It was how he turned to look at me, not with the guilty expression of a dog caught misbehaving, but with something else entirely. A calculating intelligence behind those amber eyes that seemed to say, "Well, what are you gonna do about it?" He adjusted his stance, straightening his back in a way no dog should be able to do, and reached higher to grab a package of store-bought cookies that I'd hidden on top of the refrigerator. "Put that down," my voice trembled, betraying the fact that we both knew I had no real authority around here anymore. Samson tilted his head, cookie package clutched in those massive paws, and he made a sound that wasn't quite a bark, but wasn't quite a laugh either. Then he simply strolled past me, on two legs, mind you, brushing against my shoulder with enough force to make me step back. He settled into my favorite armchair in the living room, tore open the package with teeth that seemed to grow more pointed by the day, and began to eat my cookies while watching me. But to understand how I ended up with a creature that was not quite a dog and not quite a man, sitting in my living room eating my Oreos like he owned the place, we need to go back to the beginning, nearly 2 decades ago. In 2006, I bid farewell to 40 years of teaching elementary school in Queens, and I purchased my dream home, a charming 2-bedroom cottage on 3 acres of land, in a location I'm not going to name in the Midwest. It's the kind of place where you can hear yourself think, where the night sky actually shows stars instead of just helicopter searchlights, and where your closest neighbor is too far away to hear you singing off-key to Fleetwood Mac while you garden. After the constant noise of city life, the honking horns, the upstairs neighbors' late-night furniture rearranging, the endless sirens and alarms, the countryside silence was both beautiful and kind of terrifying. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, because it was quiet. You don't realize how used to the sounds of the city you get until they're suddenly gone. Those first few months were an adjustment. I'd always pictured retirement as a peaceful transition into my golden years, puttering around a garden and finally reading all those books that I'd collected. Nobody warns you how lonely it can get when you go from 30 chattering children and a teacher's lounge full of colleagues to nothing but the occasional delivery person or mail carrier. I considered getting a cat for company, low maintenance, independent, perfect for a woman beginning her retirement journey. But fate had other plans, delivered by a stranger's knock on my door one unusually warm October evening. I remember every detail of that night with the crystal clarity that comes from revisiting a memory too many times, searching for signs I should have noticed. The sun was setting earlier by then, painting the sky that peculiar autumn purple. I had just finished washing dinner dishes when 3 sharp knocks echoed through my little cottage. In the city, I'd have checked through the peephole, maybe even kept the chain latched while opening the door. Country living had already softened those city-honed survival instincts, though. I opened the door wide to find a man I'd never seen before standing on my porch. He wasn't particularly tall or short, fat or thin. His face was unremarkable in every way, the kind you'd forget immediately after seeing. But his eyes, they had that same intelligent, calculating look I would later recognize in Samson. And in his arms, he held a squirming bundle of tawny fur. "Evening, ma'am," his accent impossible to place. "Couldn't help but notice you're all alone out here. Thought you might appreciate some company." He shifted the bundle in his arms, revealing the puppy's face. "This here's Samson. Special breed. One-of-a-kind guard dog." The puppy looked up at me with amber eyes that seemed too aware for an animal so young. His paws were enormous, like a child wearing their parents' mittens, completely disproportionate to his otherwise normal-looking body. "I don't know," I hesitated, even as something in me reached out toward the puppy. I wasn't planning on getting a dog. I'm not sure I'm up for all that responsibility. The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Samson here practically raises himself. He just needs food, shelter, and a bit of understanding when things get unusual." Before I could question what he meant by unusual, he added, "I'm relocating overseas. I can't take him with me. I just need $100 to cover his shots." I should have asked for paperwork, for records of those supposed shots. I should have questioned why someone would sell a pure-breed puppy for a mere $100. I should have done a lot of things differently on that night. Instead, I found myself counting out 520s from my wallet, accepting the warm weight of the puppy into my arms, and watching as the stranger disappeared down my long driveway into the gathering darkness without even leaving his name. "Well, Samson," I whispered to the puppy sniffing curiously at my collar, "I guess it's just you and me now." If only I'd known then that the creature I'd just invited into my home would become something straight out of those campfire stories my 5th graders used to scare each other with. The legendary Dogman of the Midwest. He started out as my innocent-looking puppy with those strangely enormous paws. Those first few weeks with Samson were relatively normal as far as puppies go. He chewed on furniture legs, he had occasional accidents on my hand-woven rugs, and he followed me from room to room with that adorable clumsiness that puppies have before they grow into their bodies. Except Samson never quite seemed clumsy, even with those massive catcher's mitt paws that the stranger had insisted would grow into proportion eventually. I tried changing his name at first. Samson seemed too formal for the little ball of energy zooming around my cottage. I tried Buddy. I tried Max. Even Peanut, given his coloring. But he simply wouldn't respond to anything but Samson. He'd stare at me with those intelligent eyes until I relented and called him by the name the stranger had given him. Fine, Samson it is, I conceded after a week of failed attempts. The puppy had yipped happily and licked in my hand as if acknowledging my acceptance of his terms. The first hint that something wasn't quite right came about a month after bringing him home. I was reading in my armchair when I glanced up to find Samson sitting perfectly still in the middle of the living room, staring intently at the television, and it wasn't even turned on. His head was tilted, his ears perked forward, as if watching a fascinating program. "What are you looking at, boy?" I asked. Samson turned to me, made a strange huffing sound, then deliberately walked to the remote control on the coffee table, picked it up in his mouth, and dropped it in my lap. Not unusual for a dog to bring things to their owner, you might think. Except the television had never been on in Samson's presence before. I had never even shown him what that remote did. I dismissed it as coincidence, the way we humans tend to rationalize away the inexplicable. But the incidents kept piling up. He learned to open the refrigerator within 2 months. He somehow figured out how to turn doorknobs by 3 months, despite those massive catcher's mitt paws that should have made such dexterity impossible. The most telling early sign was his growth rate. I had taken him to the local veterinarian for a checkup shortly after getting him. "What breed did you say he was?" Dr. Murray had asked, examining those peculiar paws with professional curiosity. "I don't actually know," I admitted. "The previous owner just said he was special." The vet had replied, measuring the puppy's paws with a furrowed brow. "Could be part mastiff with these mitts, but his bone structure doesn't match. I'd expect him to top out at maybe 80 pounds based on his current development, but I can't be certain. 80 pounds seemed reasonable for a medium to large dog. What didn't seem reasonable was how Samson hit that weight by 6 months, and then kept growing. His shoulders broadened, his chest deepened, and those paws finally began to look proportional. Not because they shrank into his body, but because the rest of him grew to match their monstrous size. By 8 months, Samson weighed over 100 pounds. His tawny fur darkened around his face and shoulders, giving him an almost mane-like appearance. And his amber eyes grew more calculating by the day. My neighbor, who I'll call Ed, who lived about a half-mile down the road, stopped by one afternoon to drop off some tomatoes from his garden. Samson had been napping in the living room when Ed arrived, but the sound of a stranger's voice brought him trotting to the door. Ed physically recoiled when he saw him. "Good Lord, what kind of dog is that?" I laughed nervously. "He's a mixed breed. Big, isn't he?" "Big ain't the word," Ed muttered, keeping his distance. "Something ain't right about those eyes. They're too knowing." Well, Ed didn't stay long, and he never brought me tomatoes again. In fact, he started crossing to the other side of our rural road whenever we were out walking. At the time, I chalked it up to him being uncomfortable around large dogs. But now I think Ed saw something in Samson that I was still blind to. Something wild and dangerous lurking beneath the surface. The questions from others continued. The mail carrier asked if Samson was part wolf. The UPS delivery person started leaving packages at the end of my driveway, rather than bringing them to the door. The few friends who still visited from the city made excuses not to return. He's just a big sweetheart. I would defend him even as Samson grew more distant, more watchful, less like a dog and more like, I don't know, something else. I was making dinner one evening when I dropped a piece of raw chicken on the floor. Before I could bend to pick it up, Samson was there. Instead of snatching it up with his mouth like any normal dog would, he reached out one massive catcher's mitt paw scooped up that chicken, and with surprising dexterity brought it to his mouth. I froze, spatula in hand, as our eyes met. For the briefest moment, I saw something like smugness in his expression, like he knew he'd just done something no dog should be able to do, and he was gauging my reaction. That night I sat at my computer and I searched, "Dog uses paws like hands." Most results were cute videos of dogs pawing at toys or doors. Nothing like what I'd seen. I tried more specific searches. Dog with human-like behavior, unusually intelligent dog, and even dog stands on hind legs. The last search brought me to folklore sites about werewolves and something called Dogman, creatures of myth that walk the line between canine and human. I laughed it off and closed my laptop, telling myself I was letting my imagination run crazy. After all, Samson was just a dog. An unusual dog, certainly, but still, just a dog. I mean, wasn't he? The answer came just 2 weeks later, when I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of my refrigerator door opening. Thinking I'd failed to close it properly before bed, I slipped out from under my covers and padded down the hallway toward my kitchen. What I saw that night in my kitchen changed everything. There stood Samson, on his hind legs, casually removing leftover roast chicken from the refrigerator. Not just standing momentarily as dogs sometimes do, but standing fully upright, his massive frame silhouetted against the refrigerator light. His movements weren't awkward or strained. They were fluid, natural, as if walking on two legs was what he'd been designed to do all along. When he turned and saw me, there wasn't even a flicker of shame. He simply stared back, chicken in hand, paw, and then, I swear this is true, he nodded at me as though saying hello before continuing his midnight feast. I backed away slowly, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were witnessing. That night I locked my bedroom door for the first time since moving to the country. Sleep didn't come for me until dawn. Over the next few months, the changes in Samson accelerated. His body continued to bulk up, particularly his shoulders and chest. His back legs grew stronger, allowing him to stand upright for longer periods. Those massive paws developed an almost finger-like dexterity. Most disturbing of all was his face, still recognizably canine, but with expressions far too complex for any dog. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. I had woken to a crash of thunder, only to find Samson had not just opened my bedroom door, but was standing beside my bed watching me sleep. On two legs. In the flash of lightning, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't dog, wasn't human, wasn't anything I could name, except, maybe, hungry. The next morning I put him outside and I kept him outside from then on. This is your space now. Samson adapted to living in my backyard with surprising ease. Within weeks, however, I noticed the fence had been damaged. Not broken, but jumped over. Samson would go away, disappearing for hours and sometimes days, before returning as if nothing had happened. Once he came back looking as though he had had a fight. When I asked Samson, "What did you do?" he merely tilted his head and made that strange huffing laughing sound. I never let him back inside my house again. I'd leave food and bowls on the porch and I'd speak to him through the screen door. Our relationship had transformed from woman and pet to uneasy neighbors sharing adjacent territories. Samson's absences grew longer, his returns less frequent. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of him prowling the edge of the woods behind my property, always upright, always watching. The local paper began to report strange sightings of an unusually large animal walking on two legs. Hunters described glimpses of something not quite wolf, but not quite man. Children weren't allowed to play outside after dusk anymore in our town. I knew what they were seeing. Over the next year, Samson returned from one absence with a peculiar-looking bone. He placed it carefully on my porch steps and waited, watching, until I came out to see it. The bone was too large to be from any deer or local wildlife. I didn't ask questions. I simply nodded acknowledgement and he disappeared back into the forest. It was a gift, I thought. Maybe? Or maybe it was a warning. The last time I saw Samson was 4 years ago, on a crisp autumn evening, much like the one when the stranger first brought him to me. I was sitting on my porch wrapped in a blanket against the evening chill, when I noticed something at the forest's edge. There he stood, massive now, at least 8 feet tall on his hind legs. His fur had darkened considerably, his face elongated into something more wolf-like than the puppy I'd once known. But those amber eyes remained unchanged, intelligent, calculating, and I thought somehow maybe a little sad. We looked at each other across the distance for what felt like an eternity, and then deliberately, he raised one massive catcher's mitt paw in what could only be described as a wave. Before I could react, though, he turned and loped away into the darkness between the trees, moving with the grace of a creature perfectly adapted to its environment. And that was the last time I saw him. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my porch at dusk, I imagine I see movement at the forest's edge, a shadow larger than any natural predator, moving with too much purpose to be mere animal. The local rumors continue. A hiker claimed to have seen a wolf walking like a man last spring. A hunter's trail camera captured a blurry image of something tall and furry, standing beside a freshly killed deer. Children whisper about the dogman who lives in the woods. I don't correct them, but I don't share what I know. Who would believe that the legendary creature was once a puppy with oversized paws who slept at the foot of my bed? I often wonder if Samson found others like himself, if somewhere deep in those woods there's a community of these creatures walking the line between worlds. Perhaps he found a mate. Maybe he has puppies of his own now. Puppies with those same catcher's mitt paws and those same knowing eyes.
He's not from Ireland, and he's not from Boston. He made this episode possible, and his name is Austin. Please join me in thanking one of our longest and most cherished channel members, Austin Pristupa, for making this episode possible. As a PayPal channel member who signed up at peterbernard.com, Austin gets to see the brand new secret uncensored episodes we're dropping this weekend, including Dogman vs. Sheep Squatch. For more information about how you can help this channel stay online, like the heroic and badass Austin Pristupa, here's our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.